Namaste. My name is Preity Upala, and I am a global thought leader and a multimedia personality. Welcome to my podcast, The Preity Experience. Join me as I explore some of the most fascinating and crucial issues that affect our world today. I take a unique global perspective on these issues, and the very foundation of my insights is humanity and spirituality. I'm Preity Upala, and welcome to the Preity Experience.
Welcome back from the break. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. Our big focus this hour is on the United States elections. In the latest coming in straight from the United States, Trump and Biden are jostling for that coveted victory. The Democratic vice presidential nominee, though, Kamala Harris, has slammed Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, for his much embarrassing public statement he made on the pandemic. He said, "We're not going to get control of the pandemic." Kamala also attacked him for comparing COVID-19 to the flu. The Senate, meanwhile, has advanced the Supreme Court nomination of Justice Amy Coney Barrett. The final vote to confirm Trump's nominee is expected tonight, U.S. time, even as Democrats are looking to thwart all attempts, this time around using digital roadblocks. Joe Biden, meanwhile, has made his anti-China stand clear. Biden, in his latest interview, dubbed China the biggest competitor. U.S. has broken all COVID records. Meanwhile, the country recording its highest number of new infections, while Trump called it a job well done on the pandemic in his latest interview. To decode the American elections, we have a special panel with us live. Ambassador Deepak Vora, former diplomat, is joining us live. Preity Upala, geopolitical analyst, is live with us. Sriram Kari, a resident editor, Deccan Chronicle, is also with us live. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, also joins us at this point on the broadcast. Ambassador Deepak Vora, let me come across to you. The race heating up now. Days to go for the American elections. What's the latest you're hearing on ground?
Thank you very much for this opportunity to report to you from New York and to learn from all the other people who are here. You can see the skyline of that beautiful city in the background. As New York gets cold, it's 9 degrees now. The election race is hotting up. Yes, this issue that's it's very important to remember. For this election, the basic issue is China. China is the elephant in the room, looming large in the background. On the one side, President Trump says that I'm going to punish China, and China has unleashed the virus. On the other side, the Democrats are saying, guys, the virus was unleashed, but you didn't handle it well. Neither side is saying that China is not responsible. Both sides agree that China is responsible. I believe it is coming down to that. In earlier elections, it was things like unemployment or the value of the dollar or freedoms or speech or whatever it was. There were many, many other issues that would involve race relations, etc. This time, an attempt is being made to revive those and to accuse President Trump of being insensitive to American requirements. But the basic issue here, sir, is China. And in the latest poll that I've seen, 57% of Americans have said that their financial situation has deteriorated because of the virus. 75% expect theirs to become worse in the days to come. But again, each time, looming in the background is the Chinese virus. So at this point of time, with just a few days to go and 60 million Americans already having voted in person or through the postal system, which is perhaps an all-time record. And this year, we expect that the number of votes that will be cast will be an all-time record. At this point of time, with the battle going on in the key swing state of Florida, it's very, very interesting. It's evenly poised. So all these polling surveys that have been done, all these predictions are of no use. The reality today is that it's the Chinese virus that is going to determine the outcome of these elections. Interesting how a foreign country becomes the dominant issue in the elections. There have been reports that Russia and Iran are meddling around, spreading disinformation. The FBI said so. Iran doesn't have the capability. It's probably the Chinese who are using the Iranian shoulder to fire their weapons. Russia certainly has been accused earlier of doing this also. You know, it's fascinating. Foreign policy somehow, or at least the China policy, has become the dominant issue. At this point of time, sir, I believe given the American system, where if you win 12 states, mind you, 12 states out of 50, you would get 276 of the Electoral College votes, and you are in the White House. It's an amazing system. It's a wonderful system. Some people would say it's a rotten system, but it has served this country well. And what we are seeing today is a very, very even contest. The friends I have spoken to, my own Quad Plus group that meets in the morning as we walk in the park, it seems to be Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar.
Okay, Preity Upala, your assessment then again of the situation on ground. I think Ambassador Vora is on the East Coast, you are on the West Coast. Is it a different perception there of the way things are going? Also, do you believe COVID will be one of the main issues in voters' mind when they cast their ballot? American President Donald Trump has been insisting that he's done a very good job as far as the situation is concerned. Obviously, his opponents say something else. Meanwhile, the COVID numbers are beginning to rise in the country as well.
Well, namaste. Thank you for having me on your show. It's always wonderful to be here. Yes, things are definitely hotting up. COVID or no COVID, President Trump continues on with his rallies. He's getting incredible turnouts no matter where he goes. And we just heard that Vice President Pence, 5 of his closest staff have actually contracted the virus today. However, that hasn't stopped him from continuing. I believe he's going to be doing a series of rallies tomorrow, which shows me that somehow they've got their stride back. I really think that the GOP at this point is feeling very, very confident, and they're going to continue on. Look, a week is still a long time in politics, and you never know what might happen. I definitely wouldn't take the polls too seriously. And if you actually see, the polls are also having a change. I think the race is tightening a little bit in the battleground states. They are very tight. In fact, some polls even show President Trump leading, and I presume as we get closer to the November the 3rd, that number will increase. Now, I do want to throw up an interesting, I don't know, it could be a conspiracy or whatnot, but I feel like there's another thing that can be thrown into the mix, which is the contestation of the elections. Because, look, there's 2 possible scenarios here. One is that Trump wins in a landslide. The second is if Trump doesn't win, he most likely will contest it. And if there is a contestation of the election results, guess what? The case ends up in the Supreme Court to be decided. And on Monday, we're going to have the the appointment of the latest justice, the Supreme Court justice. So that will swing again in Trump's favor. So I don't know if their campaign is sort of cooking up these plans or not, but I have read this. Other analysts have been saying this, which is not spoken about much in the mainstream media, which could make things interesting. But if that were to happen, I think they would be outraged, because obviously half of the country will not be happy with that. And they might even feel like they were cheated in some way. And it's funny that the Chinese virus is really the foreign interference here. And you know what? Russia wants Trump. China wants Biden to win. Iran, I'm presuming, wants Biden to win. So we're even. I don't think anybody can be accused of interference. I think there's several elements in some way. Look, I think this is going to be the American people will get a say. As far as their vote is concerned, that will be clean. And the mail-in ballots, some of them are being knocked down and invalidated. So we shall see what happens to that too. So time will tell. I think the next week is going to be extremely exciting for us.
Professor Nalapat, so COVID, of course, will play a role, is what our, what your previous speakers have said. We're also hearing that China will, of course, also figure in voters' minds. There's been a lot of dialogue, of course, about this coronavirus or Chinese virus, as the president has referred to it. But now Joe Biden also taking a very anti-China position. Taking a firm stance against China, saying that he's not going to go easy on China. So voters should not get confused on that aspect. He's also going to take a stern position against China. Do you also believe that China, COVID, these are going to be some of the main issues in American voters' minds? Already voting has started. The ballots have been going out, and millions of ballots have been mailed in what looks like going to be a very high voter turnout election?
Well, I'd like to say that China is definitely front and center. And the fact that this virus escaped from China and frankly traveled all over the world in luxurious comfort in airlines, which left Wuhan and other parts of Hubei and very generously transmitted the virus all across Europe and North America and across the world. I think we are all, those particular flights, the COVID flights, are responsible for this pandemic. And I do believe China ought to have controlled the virus in Hubei and rather than allowed it to spread all over the world. Having said that, I'd like to say, I'm sorry, but President Trump's people are right when they say that you have to learn to live with this virus. The fact is that you can't shut down the whole country, because of this. You have to get used to it. And initially you had a huge spike in death rates, mainly because, frankly, the treatment protocols were completely, were completely wrong. Many people died because of the treatment they were given. For example, they were pushed onto ventilators and their lungs couldn't bear the strain. They didn't know what was happening. And today you have therapeutics and very good therapeutics. And you can see President Trump is now, like a young man. He's bounding around the place like an antelope. He's far more energetic now than before he had COVID and got fit with therapeutics. I want to remind you, AIDS, Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci and everybody tried working on a vaccine for AIDS. Well, the poor chaps haven't got it yet, but you have therapeutics for AIDS. And guess who produces 94% of that therapeutics? India. There's a gentleman in India who basically runs the Cipla, Yusuf Hamid. And I'm surprised he's not yet a Bharat Ratna. He deserves it, frankly. The fact is that 94% of those drugs are supplied by India. So the Trump team is right. You have to live with it and you have to work out the therapeutics. And this is what Trump is doing. This is what Pence is doing. They're not, they're not completely going into seclusion because of something that is spreading like wildfire. Because what is happening today, the entire global economy has been destroyed, not so much by COVID, but by the response to COVID. We are seeing that in India, we are seeing that in the United States, we are seeing that in Europe, we are seeing that all over the world. And countries whose economies are doing well, incidentally, China, for example, where less than 190 million people at the most were under lockdown. Please let me remind you, in India, 1.3 billion people under lockdown. In China, 190 million. In Taiwan, there was no lockdown. And the Taiwanese economy is doing well. The Chinese economy is doing very well. So Trump was right. Having said that, I'd like to say, the reality is, if Trump had chosen the Hispanic judge rather than Amy Coney Barrett, I can tell you, I would have said 100% he's going to win. Because Hispanic vote is critical in the states Trump needs. Florida, you name it, New Mexico, Texas, all these states, Hispanics are critical, but then somebody in his team said, no, we already have one Hispanic judge. We can't have 2 Hispanics out of 9. And they chose Amy Coney Barrett, who's anti-abortion. So a lot of women are going to be upset by that. Who's anti-welfare. She believes that if you don't work hard, you don't deserve welfare. Who's anti-healthcare. And I can tell you today, the vote to confirm Amy Coney Barrett could also be a vote to confirm Joe Biden as the 46th president of the United States.
Okay. Okay, that's an interesting point that you're raising. Sriram Kari, come in here on how you believe the American elections are going so far. What are the main issues that you believe will figure on voters' minds and who you think it's advantage currently?
Firstly, Mr. Singh, I'm happy with the slightly divergent note taken by Professor Nalapath. Otherwise, it was beginning to look like the extended Republican convention from India and online. And his sartorial choices reflect his political views, and it's interesting. I wouldn't know this dimension of American politics if the symbolism of the politics or the ethnicity of a particular judge nominated to Supreme Court would play singularly such a critical vote as to swing the verdict of an entire election. The very fact that Joe Biden is trying so hard to establish himself as somebody capable of, has the propensity to deal with China strongly, seems to endorse to me Ambassador Deepak Vora's point of view that perhaps China is indeed a very significant issue, though not in the way we analyze it in TV studios, in our articles, etc. Very often the symbolism plays out like this. If you did a survey straightforward saying, who do you think will be tougher on China? Everybody, including those who perhaps might be voting for former Vice President Joe Biden, would say Trump would meet tougher on China. The analysis of Donald Trump and his presidency will depend on the verdict, if we do it now or 4 years later. And I'm amongst those people who believe his re-election would go on as per default American context, that every president generally goes on to win. A win is a natural default in America, a re-election of a sitting president. In terms of economy, in terms of his foreign policy, in terms of war, in terms of disrupting prior trade agreements, the larger dimension is Donald Trump as the candidate in 4 years ago and now as the president is portraying himself as an outsider to a system fantastically well, while being ironically, unlike Prime Minister Narendra Modi, an outsider despite being an inheritor of wealth of a different scale. He's saying, I'm an outsider to politics. I earn wealth as a businessman, fine. I don't have these, tangled web of deceit with foreign countries. My economic interests are above everything else. To me, sometimes he represents, like Lord Henry from the picture of Dorian Gray, a character who doesn't say good things and doesn't do bad things actually. So I believe his record on economy is actually wonderful. If his personality was different, we would have analyzed the achievements of the Trump presidency differently. He's perhaps the only president of America in the last 50 years who hasn't actually waged a war. And yet, he went on to do a peace talk with North Korea. I mean, it's stupendous. If his personality was like Barack Obama, the whole world would have been a fan of his in terms of his achievements. Yet his personality overshadows. His Twitter diplomacy we have a very prominent diplomat and former ambassador to Poland on a panel. He would tell you what kind of headache it could be, and I said sometimes perhaps, to have to deal with a boss like that who could do away with works of months, years with one tweet. But the point about Trump is by calling it the Chinese virus, and Preity Upala did that too. The reference is Chinese virus, constantly reminding people China is the enemy. And Biden is a possible ally, if not ally, at least somebody who's on friendly terms with China for a variety of reasons, gives you discomfort. Economy, I think the dealing of economy by Trump has been fairly good actually, despite his, like I said, the flourishes of his personality. In terms of, he's really put America first in trade, and we have been at the receiving end at certain times, which is fine. There is no altruism in diplomacy and foreign affairs. Each country should, and they do, put their own interests at the top. If it comes to handling China, punishing China, if it comes to managing and recovering the economy, these two things Americans know by and large Trump will do a better job. As far as vaccine is concerned, I think most Americans know, with a sense of entitlement of being citizens of the most important country on earth, that wherever the vaccine is found, invented, ready, America, whoever be the president, American deep state will ensure a bulk of American, take the lion's share and get those vaccines. They're not unsafe about it. Would certain issues like universal health care like care for senior citizens, pension, those kind of things on which Biden would have a sway over Trump, are they mattering enough? I agree with Professor Nalapat that if these issues of sensitivities and sense of security and voice of the minorities, ethnic, national minorities mattered, Biden would be a natural choice. Democrats would be a natural choice. I don't know if in this circumstance, those set of priorities really come at the top for a bulk of voters. The mobilization numbers are interesting. We do not know how many of these votes, a record of sorts, will really count in the end. There is a flurry of push by both campaigns in significantly those swing states. But at the start, Ambassador Vora did say there is a very curious structure to American politics. You know, for example, California will go with Democrats. You know where Texas will go, no matter what the fight looks like. Eventually, a few swing states will turn it around. And there, right now, it is still tough. But I would say advantage. Trump continues. Do not see a reason why the whole of America will want to disrupt a sitting president's continuity.
Okay. But Preity Upala, these large numbers, Ambassador Vora, I'm coming to you in a second. Preity Upala, these large numbers, this high voter turnout that's predicted, what does this really signify in your opinion?
Well, that's a great point. Normally, with a lower voter turnout helps the incumbent, because it's, even though the ones who are not happy, they usually are not coming out to vote. And obviously, the base of the incumbent is. In this case, I do think it shows a healthy democracy. I'm happy to see a higher voter turnout. I think the 2016 wasn't the highest. So it's great. And I think it's swinging both ways. I mean, even though I'm here in California, which is a very blue state, every weekend here in Beverly Hills, there's been a huge rally, a Trump rally. And it's, hundreds and hundreds of, going into the thousands. Right in the middle of a very, very blue state. And everyone I speak to is very excited. There's a lot of conservatives coming out. They're galvanizing as well. And then our own community, of course, I work with several grassroots groups across party lines. But honestly, it's the Trump campaign and Indians for Trump, I think, movement that has gained a lot of steam, considering what has been going on vis-a-vis Indian government in the past, I guess, year or two. So the higher voter turnout is good. However, I think the mail-in ballots, there's a big question mark. Not all of them will be counted. I think the ones that are not, that seem a little dodgy are going to be tossed, and there might be a large number of the mail-in ballots that will not end up counting. So, and then obviously on the day you have to hope that there's a huge turnout, and we'll see which camp is going to come out and vote then on the day.
Yes, Ambassador Vora, you had a point to make.
I just wanted to say, to reinforce what Ms. Upala has said, and a slight divergence from what Professor Nalapat, who's infinitely more wise than I am, has said. Sir, America is based on its exceptionalism. America is different. America is better. Even during Barack Obama's time, the Chinese came out with some kind of white paper on defense and talked about challenging America. And then Obama responded with, "We are the most powerful country in the world, period." This is the view that most Americans have. Therefore, today, sir, when Trump compares the atmosphere, the ambience, the air in the United States with the filthy air, as he said, in Russia, in China, and in India, we may be upset, but it's true. He's trying to reassure the Americans that you are still the greatest country in the world. And when I talked about making America great again, I have achieved what I had set out to do. And the bottom line, sir, based on my morning group, is dealing with the virus, with the Chinese virus, we prefer a person who has made perhaps some mistakes, but now knows what to do, rather than an unknown guy who comes in with some kind of a plan that might or might not work. Basically, to put it colloquially, a known devil would be today better than an unknown devil, sir.
Okay. Professor Nalapat, would you like to respond?
No, I just want to point out that Robert Lighthizer, President Trump's trade representative, has been as, if I may say so, ruthless as during the Clinton administration in trying to basically harm the Indian generic and pharma industry. And I'd like to point out that it was George Bush, a Republican president. Initially, George Bush tried to go American in getting therapeutics. Then he realized India was the answer. Then he went Indian. I hope that if Trump is re-elected, he will follow the example of George Bush and wise up to the fact that 90% of therapeutics that can make people who suffer from COVID into Donald Trump's can come from India. What has been done with AIDS can also be done with COVID-19 and from India. So having said that, I'd like to point out there's no doubt, in my view, although the Democrats make fun of it, that the Trump administration has a far better realistic view on the virus than the Democrats have. And I think Americans, frankly, are terrified of not just the virus, but the measures that were taken because of the virus and the knockoff effect on jobs and incomes of those measures. I think that is definitely going to be helpful to Trump.
Yes, Sriram.
I am coming from Hyderabad, where I'm told 2 out of 5 vaccines eventually get manufactured in the planet. So our city's interest, our country's interest is such that a Trump victory would make a big difference. I don't think, and end of the day, when Americans vote, they'll be missing the fact how many people did a terrorist like Osama bin Laden kill? I mean, how many Americans died on American soil because of the acts of Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden? There somewhere is a subconscious question: how many did Xi Jinping eventually kill? A virus that couldn't move from Wuhan to Shanghai to Beijing conveniently traveled to New York. Yes, Americans should have shut their airspace down, but why did they just do it? So I'm not comparing the head of another state, a neighboring state, to a terrorist per se, but I believe that subconscious anger is really the elephant in the room. And I think come November 3rd, that angst, don't forget, Americans will put their pride and security in being the most powerful nation above all else. Other priorities matter, they'll get pushed down. Will you punish China for the death of over 200,000 Americans and more and rising on American soil? I think this vote is truly about getting the American resolve to respond to China in a very strong way. And I think therefore, eventually, all the other factors playing out yet cancelling each other, it will be President Donald Trump getting re-elected again.
Well, we'll be tracking the story, of course, very closely.
Lives versus livelihoods. 200,000, over 200,000 lives gone and over 100 million livelihoods destroyed.
Yeah.
That is the stark choice before people, sir.
All right. Well, we're going to be tracking this story very closely. For now, though, we're completely out of time. My thanks to all of you for joining us. Let's take a break. Much more ahead.